Welcome to Finance at the Jobsite, the podcast where construction finance meets the field. I'm your host, Rishi Srivastava, founder of Being Human. In each episode, I sit down with construction CFOs, controllers, owners, project managers, IT leaders, ERP consultants, and industry experts to uncover how they connect the back office with the field, choose and implement technology, manage cash flow, and drive profitable projects. Whether you are running the numbers, leading the team, or designing the systems that keep projects moving, this is your place to learn what's working, what's broken, and what's next in construction finance. Our guest is Veronica Whitesell. Veronica, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
The first section here is from pipelines to renewables. Your career arc reads like 4 different careers stitched together. Animal science, 7 years on active pipelines, owning an insurance agency, and now Dynamite R&D. What's actually the same job in all of them?
All of the things that I've done, I think I attribute it to the same thing I've done, and all of those would probably be critical thinking. When you're working with horses or any kind of animal, you have to understand as being the human, you are relatively the predator. So you have to learn how to communicate that you're not the big bad wolf. That kind of goes hand in hand with being in business and communication and, throughout life, and kind of comes into the insurance. So I dealt with risk assessment, liability, and I'm not an attorney. I'm not a financial advisor, but when you look at those kinds of things, you have to almost put like your legal hat on and think, how could this go bad? How could, this impact not just my cash flow, but my business's future, things like that. And when you do that, kind of is the same thing within pipeline. You have to critical think through your day, as in the projects you're doing. Pipeline, kind of like what we do in Dynamite R&D, is very you can put your life on the line. You can have other people's lives in your hands. So you've got to think things through. How does this affect me? How does it affect other people? How does this affect the bottom line of, maybe the business or the industry or the day? All the things together, all those things together come back to critical thinking for sure.
Yeah. Actually, I started a company 4 years ago. And when you're a founder like yourself, you have all the hats: accounting, lawyer, marketing, sales, everything, cleaning the toilet, everything is on you.
Yes. Yeah, all the way through. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In your pipeline career, you were an operations tech directing large projects on live pipelines, pressure testing, resleeving, hot work, LOTO, NCCER, Tank 653s.
Mm-hmm.
What did pipeline ops teach you about managing crews, compliance, and relationships that you brought directly into Dynamite?
The biggest thing for that is process. So that's like that's the word that I use that everyone in my, that either works for us or in our organization hates. I'm always saying, hey, what's the process for this? And process can be used a kind of a couple of different ways, of a single person's way of doing something or an actual standard operating procedure. So, what pipeline taught me was planning, which is again a process. And then you have to keep improving those processes. So you can't get complacent. Complacency is, oh man, that thing that can spread like a virus. Creates the old saying, we've always done it this way, so we're going to keep doing it that way. I hate that. I hate it. And it usually comes out of older guys' mouths have been around for a long time, and they're teaching the young whippersnappers how to do things, and that being complacent in your processes, that stifles your growth. I think the main reason why, super small companies can get ahead, especially like 2025, 2026, is because they're willing to innovate new ideas, new software, new apps, new way of doing things, but also keeping and incorporating all of those new things into the process. And it kind of goes back to you have to keep improving the process. So that's kind of, you know, that's the biggest thing it taught me was what's A, what's B, what's C. And when you lay that out, almost in a map in front of you, you're going to cut out a lot of the, oh, hey, we forgot this, or hey, we didn't realize that this was going to be a problem. I mean, it's
Such a great point. 2025 world has changed, and 2026 the world has changed so much. So I was talking to a VC, and he used to fund construction tech companies, and now he says that the software selling is like selling porta potty now. So he's saying that construction companies don't want to change, and he's raised a lot of money, and he's building a construction company himself, a construction management company, and he's gonna deliver 30% faster for 30% less cost, because he's going to use everything cutting edge.
yeah. And that's like, I'll just use an example. I mean, we just switched over to Foundation's ERP from QuickBooks, and I'm not an accountant. Like you said earlier, we have to wear all the hats, right? When we're a founder and an owner and operator. I've done the field work in my past career. It's a little different than what we're doing now, but to me, the processes are similar. So when you are looking at, hey, because time is money, money is time, time is money. So if there's a something you can bring in software or a person or something you can bring in that will help mitigate those pain points that you have, or something that costs you a lot of time, especially as an owner, you don't have time to sit there and put journal entries and your accounting and all the things. So the faster you can start incorporating that, yeah, it's expensive up front. However, if you cost it out and you look at what it's going to save you in time or save you in process, you're going to be so far ahead of the mark. I mean, we still have uh, union offices working on strictly paper. And sometimes our mail system takes 30 days to get, a letter or a contribution letter from, our place to 15 miles away because of their process. It has to go to Chicago. It has to come back. And it's a 3 to 30-day process. I don't know why it is what it is, but it's not efficient. Processes and using cutting edge technology cuts the fat. It can really impact, even if let's say you're impacting your bottom line on a project by 1% more revenue, you start stacking that up. That's a huge chunk.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge chunk. And when you can onboard somebody who's like, hey, I know how to use that, or it's super simple and it takes away a ton of time and steps, dude, you're just winning, every single time that you're utilizing it.
Yeah. And I think companies are scared of change, right? They've done things certain way for past 20, 30, 50 years, whatever. It's tough to swallow that change. You got to learn new things.
Yeah. I mean, I come from pipeline where we're literally using 1960s technology and we're just like upgrading safety and upgrading certain things, but they're like, no, this is the way we've always done it. And I'm like, I understand. I get that. There's other ways that we can do some things. Yeah.
Dynamite has had 116% year over year growth since you started in 2022. How were you able to grow that from the ground up to now?
The simplest way I can put it is our favorite words and what we stand by, what we live by, even inside outside of business: integrity, continuity, and drive. It's amazing to me in 2026 how someone with the want and the hunger and the drive, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. No one in construction's reinventing the wheel. History repeats itself. We're going through a solar energy boom, no different than we went through a wind energy boom, no different than we went through an oil energy boom. It will come, it will stagnate out, it will be maintenancing time instead of installation. We're not like I said, we're not reinventing the wheel. But when you've got the younger generation coming in, and I'm 41. I'm not afraid to tell you my age. I'm 41. I started in pipeline when I was 23. That was fun coming out of college as a 23-year-old blonde female and going directly into the wolf's lair. it's crazy to me how so many companies, large or small, they're inefficient. They're not willing to put in the work past quitting time. Not all of them, obviously, and not everybody who works for them. But there's a lot of issues that we have as a main subcontractor and a preferred subcontractor for some of these bigger venture-backed companies of just people doing their job. I can't do my job and deliver my job unless, the field on their side gets us the information, gets us the contract signed and started. Like there's so many steps in the process of that they're not checking off the box. And then they think sending out an email to someone is just, okay, it's off my plate. I don't have to deal with it. They're not checking back. They're not, making sure things are getting done. Some of them are, but I also think a lot of it comes down to the experience issues, of young people don't have a ton of that experience. But like the other thing I attribute it to is brand building. And it doesn't mean just a logo. When you're creating your brand for your company, your brand is what people think of your company from the outside looking in. And the best way to build that and protect it is out of employees' mouths.
Mm.
And so no one's going to take care of your business like you will. But if you take care of your employees, if you give them a company they can work for to be proud of, and I mean like super proud, for
Mhm.
one, your turnover rate's going to be low. For two, you're going to have people lined up at your door, knocking at your door saying, hey, I want to work for you. Hey, I want to work for you. Those are the biggest things of the integrity of doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. The continuity of doing it the way it's expected to be done every single time, even when no one's looking. Under promise, over deliver, all of those little nuancy sayings that everyone says that a lot of people will say up front and then they will not commit and actually end up executing on.
One thing that growth exposes is the weakness of your processes.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you are operating a small scale, you can get away with a lot of inefficiency. You, Veronica, yourself, are managing all the chaos.
Yeah. And my dog's name is Chaos. So I literally manage chaos every single day.
But like when you grow, and let's say you grow another 100% next year, now, the fire is going to be bigger, it's going to be harder for you to control. You better figure out some system.
Yeah. And the system comes down to, a lot of people's like, how did you do this? How do you do this? I'm like, well, for one, it's sacrificing like all of the things, man. For a long time, for the first 2 years, we didn't really go out to eat. We didn't go on vacation. We didn't splurge. None of that. And you have to be willing to do that. And there's a lot of companies that's why they filter out in like 3 years of startup because they're just not willing to put, I hate this saying, but, put your head down and grind. Like if you don't love that process, this is not for you. This is not for you. You cannot expect your employees to work as hard and as long and as many hours as you do because their name's not on the mailbox, But that doesn't mean that you don't expect them to work hard, but they also are human beings and they don't have the skin in the game that you do.
Actually, I heard it somewhere. You have to cheer yourself for 3-4 years because nobody else is cheering for you. You're
No,
suffering.
there is no one that is happy for you at all. They're all like, oh, it sounds so good. That's great you're doing that. And then when you start like, you'll start reclusing into why do I want to go to dinner with blah, 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 or, this person, that person, when they're just being nosy anyway. Cause usually like, oh, why would I get a phone call like, hey, we'd like to go to dinner with you, blah, blah, blah. We've never really been to dinner, Susan. Like, you know what I mean? So you start reclusing in, you start losing you lose some friends, man. Like you lose,
Yeah.
especially when you live in a small town, and nobody in that town's going to cheer for you. They're not going to buy your product. They're going to buy Kim Kardashian stuff before they even come close to buying yours. But when you make it, they're like, oh yeah, we've been friends for so long. I'm like, sure.
So another
Sure,
saying
Pop.
is before you succeed, they tell you why you're working so hard. And after you
Yeah.
succeed, they tell you got lucky.
Yeah, it's so much luck. My favorite is you guys, you need to take some time for yourself. You need to, and I always do like this weird girl like voice with that because that's usually that's what I hear when it comes out of your mouth, whether it's a man or a woman. You just need to take time for yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup. My cup was empty a long damn time ago. Like,
Yeah.
but in 4 or 5 years, like, we're getting to the point now to where there is light at the end of the tunnel. We're now seeing, and we've put processes in place. We've just been consistently reinvesting the money back into the business, back into the business. And then we've also now gotten to the point where, okay, well, we need to diversify. And there's some other things that I want to do that I have connections and contacts with. So I've kind of branched off and started some completely different industry, side hustles for now that will take off and do some different things. And I believe in multi-revenue streams. You're going to have a lull in one business where another business can pick up for that. You're not going to share funds, but you're going to be able to kind of, complement each other, even if it's not the same industry.
Yeah, the one thing that is always constant in this world is change. So your business is gonna change no matter what you think about it right now.
Yeah,
Because the
absolutely.
world is changing so fast.
Dude, I love change. Everyone's so afraid of like laws and regulations. I'm always like, how can I work in the gray area? How can I maximize this issue instead of the doom gloom? I'm that person over here like, heck yeah, change. I'm loving this because now I'm like, ooh, I could sneak over from second to third base and no one's gonna pay attention. I'm always I always prepare us to be put, like, I prepare to have options if we ever find ourselves between a rock and a hard place. Like, that's how my brain works. But I'm always thinking 5 to 10 years ahead of everybody, be like, what's the trend? What's coming? What can I do now to help us jump ahead there?
Actually, I have not met a construction owner who's as forward looking as you. I hope my other
It's
listeners think.
crazy because people just look at me like I've got a basket of snakes on my head. Like, they're like, what? And 3 or 4 years down the road, they're like, "Hey, this new thing's coming." Like, "Hey, remember that one time I told you that and you said I was nuts? Cool. Awesome." Like, we're already prepared to step in the middle of that. Like, we're set up, we're ready. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy.
The next section here, Veronica, is the bank gauntlet. You went to 7 or 8 banks before one would back a brand new construction business. What were they actually telling you no to? And what was different about the one that finally said yes?
When you go to any financial institution, they're going to put you into a proverbial box and they're going to put that there's a label on that box. And depending on what you show up with in your hands or digitally, whatever it is, the way you want to do it is going to decide what box you get put in. Probably 87% of small, newer construction companies are going to be put in the same box. And that comes down to your accounting sucks or doesn't exist. You think you know your numbers, but you don't actually know how money works in construction. It's not the same as regular cash in, cash out, not by far. And just knowing, like, if you don't know job costing, if you're not doing job costing, there's no way for you to show actual profit revenue. Or I'm sorry, actual profit on your jobs. So yes, you can show, hey, we've made X amount of dollars, our expenditures are X amount of dollars, but that doesn't tell the whole story. We learned that through banks kind of like, yeah, we'll take some time after lunch, come in and talk like that. I'm the person, I'm like, listen, I got my stuff prepared. I'm going to pitch you. Like, I want you to take, and I found that going to small banks that people we know work at in our little hometown area or around us, if you don't already come from a construction company that's 30 or 40 years old, they're not taking you serious anyway. They're just not. And so it's kind of they're just, placating you and just meeting you. And then, well, when you have this, come back to us. Or, well, we can do 50,000 on this as a line of credit on this $500,000, project that you're sitting there with a contract in your hand. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with $50,000? Like, am I supposed to buy my guys some t-shirts with that? Like, that doesn't even get us close started the first 30 days. When you're mobbing out, mobbing it, all the things. And we're not even that, like, it was almost an insult to me of, I have one of these contracts. I have a history of these contracts turning into almost $1 million by the time the year is over, like that. But I had no way to show them that. And if you can't speak with numbers, you can't speak at all. They want to be able to just look at paper, look at the numbers, and the numbers on the paper tell the story. And that's what they want to see. They don't want to sit there and ask you 75 questions and then you have to look it up and find it from this document over here. You need to have it ready to go.
Yeah. What did that financing process look like in practice? What did you have to put on the table personally? And what would you tell a first time construction owner to prepare before they walk into their first bank meeting?
Kind of going back to some of the stuff we just talked about, our financial process completely changed from the first time we met to the final bank that we got together with. Not only was it our double journal entry accounting, I mean, that's standard. I think it's like GABA 36 or whatever that GABB, whatever that standard is for most. That's mostly the American National Standard. Also putting together, making sure that on your financial statement, you have all of your debt, all of your revenue, everything you own. If you're an S-Corp and you're a shareholder, you need to have a personal statement versus a business statement. And there better not be any piercing of the veil between them. And that's a big thing that a lot of your small contractors, they think that just because they step outside and they proclaim, I'm a sole proprietor, that's what that means. I'm like, that's not how that works. But, having your business entity set up in the state that you are domiciled, having your insurance, having everything and everything job costed out from your overhead to what this job costs you. Here's what you bid. Here's your actual cost. You bid it too low, so you lost money. You bid it pretty well, so you actually gained more of a profit than what you thought. Those are all of the things that you need to have together in a portfolio. Like I said, the numbers on the pages need to tell the story of your business. Need to say, this is what we do. Just kind of, there's going to be things that you think is going to be the right thing to do as a small, because of the amount of resources you have to work with. Let's say you have an older truck that you've been using and it's got some issues. And so you want to rehab it, fix it, put some parts in it. 9 times out of 10, that's a really bad idea. We learned that lesson of rehabbing 2 trucks last year. It's $70,000 total for 2 trucks. We will never realize that those actual dollars in those trucks. That helped us build a process for the future. I mean, we could have went and bought a brand new truck at that, and had one less issue to deal with. Be prepared. You got to have a good credit score personally. You've got to have a good credit score for your business and a good pay your bills on time all the time. If there is an issue, contact whoever you owe and say, hey, I'm promising you X amount of dollars, like just communication. That will help you. But you've got to be making sure that the money you're making in your business is going back into your business and funding your business. You can't just, I got a $50,000 contract and I got my first draw. I'm going to go buy a side-by-side with it. Like banks are that you laugh. That happens a lot around here. Happens a lot. I mean, we do use side-by-sides to weld out of, but they're not like, and we're actually getting ready to transition into either like Gen 2 Raptors or something like that we can license and drive down the road from these job sites. The first time is going to be hard. You're going to have to work really hard. You're going to have to sacrifice all of the things. You're going to have to sell the boat. You might look at downsizing your house. When we started this, I knew we had to keep reinvesting the money into the business. I even took on like a part-time sales job. And all of the other things I was doing in my daily responsibilities for our business. For one, it was a cold calling job.
My God.
Oh my gosh. This was 2022 and I hated it and I hated the idea, but there was a reason. I wanted to know how prevalent in marketing that actually where I've never done that before. And I wanted to know why it sucked, why it didn't work. And it took me about 3 weeks in out of a 6-month stint to figure out this is dumb. Why are we doing this? But it paid me money and I made some commission because I'm a talker, you can tell, but I don't BS people. And so sometimes, wifey or spouse might need to like keep a hold of their job for a minute, or you might need to keep a hold of like, your moonlighting job for a moment to get things rolling the right direction.
Yeah. So before starting my business, for 5 years, I've been contemplating planning and saving, and then once you take that jump and there's no regular paycheck coming, you know,
No,
and
no,
you think your family is going to like it, they don't.
no, no. My husband and I are very fortunate because it's just us. We don't have any kids. We have family, we have 2 dogs, and oh my gosh, they as long as they just keep getting their real good dog food and get to go to the kennels they get to go to and do the things they get to go and do. But we are 2 very different people. Actually, we're kind of the same people, but we're very different from others. We are those that, when I left my pipeline career, I left for a couple of different reasons. But I even went to college knowing I did not wanna work for somebody else. I went to s I went to college. I was an equine scholarship, Western rider for an equestrian team. And I was very good at judging and just in doing that industry, and you know, on my stepdad's side of the family, that's all I grew up doing was horses, and then some oil field stuff and different things and welding and all of that kinda goes with farm life, but I went in knowing I did not wanna work for anybody else. Well, they hang the carrot out in front of you of, "Hey, 2008, there's a $30 an hour job, you could work for Pipeline." "Okay, I'm game." And I was there for about 7.5 years, and about 4.5 years in, I was like, "I've had enough of this. I've had enough of this." But you sell everything, man. Like, when you make the transition, if you are not selling something and getting rid of loans and stacking money up and actually doing the work to get there to start, you should not be pulling the plug on whatever else you're doing and jumping in.
Yeah, great points. So again, continuing on the bank gauntlet, looking back, would you do it the same way today, or is there a path you wish you'd taken instead of the bank gauntlet route?
Like to use the saying, "There's 1,000 ways to skin a cat." Knowing what I know now, I wouldn't do it the same way. However, hindsight's always 2020.
Mm,
Right, right. So, it wouldn't change if I didn't know what I know now, but the I'm not we're getting into looking at doing some partnerships on a separate building a separate business for that. I think partnerships and I think stakeholders within your business can be really good, but when you are as hard-headed as me and you are as forethought and sightful as me, unless it's a you know, very special individual to partner with, I usually scare the pants off of most people when I'm like, "Listen, this is what's gonna be a big thing in the next 10 years." And they're just like, "Why are we putting money to it?" Like, they would just be like, "Why are we putting money towards that?" I'm like, "'Cause I'm telling you, like, I've not been wrong." And it's history repeating itself. It's just with different industries. And then you watch the rules and the regulations change, and you watch things that are brought to the table and in committees and white papers that are produced by, just universities and industry folks. And the bank in our area, the bank route is really the only way to go for us. Once you do that, you evaluate your company, you get good processes in, you get some certifications, ISO and women owned and all the things. And then you can kind of look at some other options to do way bigger jobs. But yeah.
the next section here is Renewables Wild West. You went from the pipeline ops world, LOTO, OSHA, API, EPA, DART, all by the book, into utility solar, which you've called quote unquote the Wild West. What are the specific things oil and gas had nailed that renewable is still working on?
Considering oil and gas has over 100 years of history and, things to be able to write their processes by, I would say I would say renewables, not just solar, not just wind. I would say renewables in general it would be process. I mean, safety has upgraded tremendously, with oil and gas. But some of the techniques and some of the things we're utilizing come from the 60s and 70s. And that's okay because it works and it's like this is the clear direction of how to do this. In oil and gas, you get your NCCER certs. You can drain up and open up a pig trap. You can utilize, how to utilize double block and bleed, annular valves for lockout, tag out, your confined space entry, like all of those little nuancy things that you're going to get through certifications. You don't really have that on the installation side of like renewables. Yes, you've got to be, let's say, a journeyman electrician, or you've got to have this certification, and have this much experience to work on the crew that hooks into the grid, vice versa, to operate a crane and all of the different things that go like wind and solar and all of those. But there's still a lot of I know these companies have processes, but I don't know how much their culture is of this is the way we do things. From company to company and job to job, there's a lot of nuances with the kind of system we're installing. There's a couple of different, solar systems that are out there. They have different ways from bolting caps on from bolting caps on the inverter pads to welding caps instead, and like just different things that engineering think like, hey, this is how we want to do this. And then a lot of times what happens is you get into that and either a part is manufactured wrong or something was drilled wrong, doesn't quite fit. You have to go in and mitigate. In the pipeline and gas world, in the oil and gas and pipeline world, that is an issue to go outside of the scope. And so that's like all hands off. We can't do things people way above our heads have to need to be making these decisions. And in the utility and renewable side, it's just kind of like, hey, Scott and Bob got together and they think that's a great idea. And they sent it to the engineers and they signed off. And so there's a lot of different nuances with process from company to company. I think they do a better job than oil and gas in tracking costs. But I mean, there's so different. You're utilizing a ton of union labor on most of the sites we're on because of the Inflation Reduction Act, and that's starting to fade out. So I think you're still going to see, because these guys now have, 5 or 6 years of really good experience on these installs, you're going to continue to see the union sides. You don't see that as much in pipeline. You see guys that work in areas together. They know their job. You have a mech tech, an ops tech, an E&I tech, and they all just go in and it's like clockwork and they're just smooth and everything works. Where, or even like a C&M crew that is installing a huge new pipe rack, like brand new, whole deal, clockwork. You go into renewables and every time one of these big projects starts, it's all new folks. Some of them have worked together on other projects, some of them haven't. And it's just different. It's not really bad or good. It's just very different.
Yeah. 30 to 45 and sometimes as long as 120-day payment terms in renewables. How do you actually finance the gap between paying union crews overhead weekly and getting paid quarterly?
This is always a fun subject. This process has been very interesting for us. It's going back to knowing your numbers. And so you can figure out how to stop playing the game of robbing Peter to pay Paul with your cash counts. What really made the difference for us, I kind of said earlier, is that my husband and I, we did not take a paycheck from ourselves for the first 2 years. And everyone says that. And then usually everyone who listens to a podcast that said, they're like, how did you live? Well, when I say we didn't take a paycheck, I mean, we didn't, like, our home bills were paid. But before we started this, we sold off as much things and items as we could. Yes, we have a mortgage. We have 12 acres on that mortgage of the personally mortgaged, but there's 12 acres. Actually, there's probably more than that the business rents from us. That is, insured. That's a lay down yard. It's all over there. It stays over there. So it helps pay for that. And, you get down to the very, very small things that you need. You're eating hot dogs. You're putting stuff in the air fryer. Like I said, I took a sales job for a little while to help float some of our personal stuff so we could keep reinvesting back into the company. Our biggest thing with being paid, I figured out very early on, I wanted to know who the heck we were working for. We didn't just bid We do not, and we still to this day will not. If I can't find information about you, like your company or who you've worked for and bring references to the table, I'm not working for you. I'm not even going to bid.
Hmm.
Because if you are not out there, everybody and their brother is on social. Dynamite, I'm on social. Dynamite has a presence on social. We're getting to the point to where we need to hire someone to help us do some content, more content. It's hard for us, and we'll get in that in a minute on the social side, but if you as a company, if I can't find you and you don't have some sort of like a website that shows what projects you've done, all the things, if it's just a generic deal and I call my union reps, if I call people I know in the industry and like, hey, have you heard of this? Can you tell me anything? And then usually I've had a FINRA license in the past. So usually I have some avenues I can jump on and I can see if you have any liens against your company, if you have, if you haven't paid your bills on time. I've got some friends that can dig up a lot of any kind of lawsuits and, stuff that's out there for the masses. I'm very good at finding information. So that's how we vet. And I actually do some vetting for other companies as well when they're like, we can't find much on these folks. Who are they? Because usually it's a subsidy of a parent company. And in renewables, especially solar, especially in the state of Illinois, you have to be very careful with the community solar companies. A lot of them are fly-by-nighters. We don't do residential work of any kind. We only do large-scale utility. We would do small stuff. And when I say small, I'm like 5 megawatt-ish. We're used to working on, 175, 200 megawatt and over. As a company, you've got to be on it. You've got to be on your accounts receivable. If we don't have a contract in our hand or a PO and it is legit and there are lien waivers involved, we don't go and start work. That's not how that's always been in the past, but that's how it is now. You have to make sure that you legally can be on that property. You can't just, someone say, hey, I just need you to come do the work, come do that. We'll figure out the pay and stuff after. That is never a good idea. That comes back to us having that integrity and continuity. I can't have integrity and continuity if I can't get you guys to do your job. If you can't get a contract and a price, whatever we bid, either on a contract or a PO, if you can't get that to me before we start work, you need me to start work. How do you think that they're going to pay you? I mean, that's how that works. So you have to be conscious of just because you're going to work doesn't mean that you're being, profitable.
Actually, this month, for the first time, I placed one of the accounts in collection.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
kind of tough doing that, and it doesn't feel good, but you have to know that sometimes people are not going to pay you.
Well, to me, it comes down to communication. We did some work. We run a semi and a low boy, and it's mostly for moving equipment on these renewable sites, back and forth because they can't just walk over a road with a huge excavator that's going to eat the road up. So we will jump pieces back and forth across the road, down the road, however big these solar sites are. And so we help out a couple of really good friends of ours that work in they've got some like larger semi towing and like wreck mediation businesses around us because we've got a couple interstates close to us. And so we went to work. They asked us if we'd help. There was a big fire and stuff on the interstate, and we don't do a lot of interstate work. We will come and pick up equipment and leave. We won't help clean up because that's a whole other safety deal, insurance, all the things. But if it's completely shut down and diverted, we'll help. And so it was a very small bill, didn't care. It was kind of all hands on deck. If you've got something that can help, we could really, really use the help, especially working with, the county police and stuff like that. We don't mind. And the bill, it was like very minute, tiny, tiny, minute bill compared to I know whatever bill they had. And so the friend who had called us for this job, he wasn't the actual owner of the job. He was helping a tow company out. And it was like all hands on deck. Well, they have yet to get paid. And I know their bill is huge. And this was last September, and we have yet to be paid. And it was
Mhm.
very minute, and I don't even care. But they stopped communicating with us on it.
Hmm.
And so the communication was, I'm like, hey, you're 300 days late, dang near, like whatever the amount was. I'm just throwing out numbers. I'm like, hey, like, I'm just putting this in front of you. I'm sure you have not received payment from the insurance company yet. I know how tracking stuff works. Just let me know. Keep in touch. They completely like blocked our email, all the things over a very small, like less than $2,000. And I'm like, listen, I'm not worried about payment. I'm not. But it's just a fact now that it's a principle of don't stop communicating with me just because I'm like, hey, I'm just keeping this up front because it's still from our books from 2025. And so, like, if you're not going to pay it or if we want to figure something else out, I'll take something in trade. We'll do something else. It's not a big deal. I don't have to have the cash. But it's just like they just stopped communicating. So I turned it over to 1099. And it is what it is, like just keep communicating with me. We'll figure it out. I understand how it works, but don't not communicate with me on stuff.
Yeah.
So we will never help that company again because it's not about the money. It's about the fact that they just don't communicate.
Yeah. Sucks.
Yeah. But anyway,
You hold a master's in emergency safety and risk management and an active PNC insurance license, IRA compliance, apprenticeship, prevailing wage, domestic content is essentially risk management bolted onto every job. How does that risk manager plus insurance agent lens save your IRA program, and what's the part most contractors most underestimate?
most contractors, they underestimate how easy that compliance is, and mostly because they're already doing the work with paper or an Excel sheet by hand. Yeah, I've got a master's in emergency safety and risk, so that's kind of it fits with the way my brain works on you're always looking at how does this hurt me? How does this hurt me? Sometimes that causes us to be overinsured. But when you have to play in the $7 million to $10 million ballpark on liability anyway, that is not easy to get, by the way. You can't just like show up one day and ask for that. Me being in that part of the business to begin with, I had a handful of people I called and I said, hey, what company is going to take this serious on a new construction? And so what we ended up having to do is I knew within the first 6 months of having just our business insurance that we were going to outgrow it. They were going to not renew us, not because it was our fault or their fault. It's just we outweighed their risk appetite. So I had started making phone calls to people I know, that work for companies I know. And I said, hey, what does it take for you guys to take this? I'm like, we are serious about this. Like, I understand you have underwriting requirements and those have to be met. I get it. What do you need from us? Like, we need some detailed resumes. Okay, perfect. And that was relatively all it took. Detailed resumes from all shareholders. They wanted to see some, not all financials, but some financials that we were solvent, those kinds of things, which to me, I've done some underwriting and I still do some underwriting as well. That makes sense from a risk aspect that, when you're dealing with the amount of trucking, the amount of, wages, and we don't even have that many employees. Like we really don't. We have a handful of like really, really, really awesome guys and gals. But when you're dealing with this much, cash flow and everything else, it's in the amount of liability. Like some of the jobs we work, you have to have a minimum of 5. And that's,
Fine.
5 million. That is hard. And the waivers of subrogation, we just actually transitioned to a different workers' comp, which is the first 2 years was really expensive because you're new. You don't have any history. I was fortunate enough that I started this S-Corp in 2017. It didn't hold any assets or actually have any income or revenue until 2022. So every time I use it for something and I start a business, I will create another one and shelf it because when it comes to insurance, they don't care the amount of revenue you've made. They care when it was started.
No.
Yeah. So there's a thought process. Now you can't just set it and forget it like a crackpot. You still have to do your annual reports. You have to do taxes on them, even if they're 0. So it does take some time and effort, but it saves you a ton of money and issues when you go to get your first insurance policy.
Very well said.
Yeah.
Next section's the unremembered hardships. Certified payroll for under 10 employees was eating about 5 hours a week in QuickBooks. Walk us through what those 5 hours actually looked like. And what finally pushed you to migrate to Foundation and payroll for construction?
A lot of F-bombs being dropped, a lot of oil field talk. So I'm sure a lot of people have seen Landman. Like, I haven't even watched the second season, but literally, like, that's legit oil field, like, old roustabout, old greenhorn talk. And so there was a lot of really colorful things that would come out of my mouth. It was not fun. It was all done, pen, paper. I would process payroll through QuickBooks. We had no way to job cost. And the nuancy things was I have one employee that most of our employees are journeymen for their particular union. I have one employee that we figured out how to float. So depending on what PLA we're signed to on these IRA contracts, he does the exact same thing. Sometimes it's under IVEW as a welder. Sometimes it's under ops tech or under international union engineers, operators. And so not on the same job, but there was jobs where we were 3 hours apart on two big jobs we were on. And some days he would go over here and weld under union operators. And some days he would go over here and weld as IBEW. It depended on the contract that those owners of the infrastructure and the prime contractors signed with unions, if he could do that. And so that was hard to do, hard to figure out, hard to read in their CBAs, their rules, their regulations, their pensions, how all of that worked with them. Uh, even their business managers, like, you can't do that. And I'm like, I called all of the funds. I called the international, like, that we're working within the scope. Now it's not so much like that because we've got so many jobs that now we've got so much, in with these unions that we're really good with them. They're good with us. We're getting our guys in the spots they need to be, and they stay in those spots now. But just getting all of the SDLL sheets, our certified payroll reports, when we transitioned over to P4C, it took me about, probably, I was actually going through a NECER for the IBEW. They always do an audit on their first year contractors. They'll usually give them, actually, like, we've been in it for like 18 months. I mean, we weren't even a signatory at the time, but we were paying in because of the contract we had signed with the PLA. And so we were going through payroll audit. So I was pulling stuff by hand and sending it to them. And that's what this firm does. They work in construction. They do audits for a lot of different union contribution funds. And so I was doing that. I was actually having QuickBooks do a cleanup and an audit of our books because we were transitioning fully over to Foundations. I mean, that was probably July. We were planning on going live in January. So we were working through P4C and doing all of that. It took me about 6-8 weeks to get P4C up and going. And oh my gosh, it was like Christmas Day, man. It was like, because payroll used to take me like 5 or 6 hours. Like, it was an all-day thing to get things rolling, moving, everything where they need to go, sent out. I then, with P4C, could do payroll in about 15 minutes, and it took me 15 minutes to send all the forms out, signed, and how they needed to be just to get them out to the right people.
Yeah.
Is it expensive? Meh, because it gives me it gives me how much time during the week back every week. Like,
Yeah.
you just can't get any better than that.
Right, right. Owning good tools, that's what they're supposed to do. Save you time enough that the ROI is there for you. $36,000 from the K withdrawal where the fiduciary failed to withhold. Most people would never share that publicly. Why do you think this kind of story is so unrepresented in entrepreneurship narratives? And what's the lesson you wish someone had told you before that letter showed up?
It's really funny we talked about this because it's the first time that this is like out on the internet for everyone and Jesus to see. So yeah, right. So I told my husband, I said, this is what's gonna happen. He's like, you're putting that? I'm like, yeah, I am. Because why not? Man, this is so simple. People cannot stand to feel vulnerable. Like they just, and there's, I hate to pick on I call them grown ass men. I hate to pick on grown men because they're like mostly in that category. I have a problem with, I don't stereotype people, but I put them in buckets and it helps me kind of like figure out things in people. And it's a lot of business owning men who's like, no, I've always been strong. We've always been on the up and up. And I'm like, that's a lie. That's, Maury says that is a lie. Strong people don't share stories of their weakness, man. And in this case, what I wish I would have known is how money works. Know what, you can take all the finance classes. I wish, my biggest regret in my entire life, is I decided to take a statistics class instead of an accounting class in college, right? You know how much time and effort and baby fits I could have saved myself from throwing if I would have just known the basics and not had to take the last 2 years really learning accounting and job costing and all of those things when I could have, paid a professor to kind of like do that hard thinking for me. But I mean, the 401k thing was funny. It's still funny. It's not funny when you get an IRS letter, but you're just like, all you can do is laugh. And
Yeah.
here's why. So I started working pipeline when I was 23. I had student loan debt like every elder millennial, right? Because if you don't go to college, you're going to be a nobody. Like that's that whole deal, right? And then when you get out, no one wants to pay you what you're worth because you don't have any experience. Like, yeah. Like, how do you get experience? How do I get a job? I don't get experience and vice versa and the whole debacle. But so I came in as a 23-year-old blonde girl and I was kind of mouthy. I mean, when you got a dad that comes from oil field, you learn to talk that talk. You don't necessarily know how to walk the walk, but you can talk the talk. And when you have a stepdad that was born and raised, on a huge cattle ranch in Montana, like there's different nuances. So it's, I watched those guys at work the first probably hour of the day, the wintertime, when there wasn't a ton of stuff that was going on. They'd play with their 401k. They'd play with how it was invested. They'd look up these companies and that and like kind of like, no, you want to do this instead of that and all the things. That's kind of how I really learned about how companies work with investments and finance on that side. So I made enough in about the first 18 months of doing of playing with that. And I didn't have it. I mean, I think I had like 15 or $2,000 to start with. And I made enough in about 18 months that sitting down and doing the math, it made sense it made way more sense and gain to surrender my 401k, take the penalties, pay the taxes, and just have them hold all of that. And I would have enough to pay my student loans off that were on compounding 9% interest. And it wasn't going to get any better. And, there was a $600 payment that would go out the window, a monthly payment, because Sally Mae gonna get her money. And so I did that thinking I did the things right. No, that's not how it worked. I expected the company that was the fiduciary on my account to withhold all of the taxes and all of the penalties. And I paid those when I did my all of the things, right? Wrong. They did not withhold any of the taxes. So I just took my U2 and my little papers I had and said, here, accountant, do my taxes. I didn't know how to check. I didn't know what I was looking for. I really didn't know what the heck I was doing. And so about 10 years later, this was probably right kind of about the time we were starting our business here. We bought a piece of property. And if you want to know if you owe somebody some money, you go buy a piece of property because that's going to pop up. All the things are going to pop up. Any kind of liens that might be on you or your business or even the business before, or if they've got the wrong name, and they're confusing you with someone else, all of those will pop up when you go buy a piece of property because they're coming. And boy, did they. I think it was like, I don't know, like $4,500 at the max on everything total, which I'd paid part of it in my penalties. It turned out to be about $37,000. And when you get slapped with that and like, hey, glad you own property now. We're putting a lien on it. I'm like, what does this mean? What is happening? Well, the best thing I can tell you is they're not taking your birthday away. Okay. So, but what a lien means from a federal organization is they can take it at any time that they would like. They can put you on a payment plan, but you still gonna pay them really terrible interest rates and really terrible penalties every single month, even though you're on a payment plan. And
Wow.
the only thing that keeps them from coming and saying, hey, we're going to take your place is because you're on a payment plan and you are showing good faith. So, on top of all of the new things with the business, we were scrambling and hustling to make that go and pay that completely off, make it go away. And there's no, hey, I want to refile. No, you have a 3-year deal where if you have it after you filed, you have 3 years. After that, doesn't matter. You're paying it. It does not matter. You're paying it. So that was nobody talks about that. I know that there's so many that have had issues like that and no one wants to talk about it and be vulnerable. I laugh at it because it is what it is. You don't know what you don't know.
And I really am thankful that you're willing to share that kind of story.
And once you've been through that and I'll be honest, everyone's like the IRS is terrible. Dude, the people that answer the phones and help you at the IRS, the people that answer the phones and help you at most you know, state regulators in offices, whether it's tax, revenue, doesn't matter. They're actually really nice people and they want to help you.
Yeah.
They're not just gonna be, you owe us money. They're not a collections. I mean, they are a collections agency, but they're trying to do whatever they can to help you because they are, and some of them have been there for 20 years and they're very good and passionate people. And they're very nice, very cordial. You got to you made the mistake, so you can't be mad at them. Yeah.
You spend 20 to 25 hours a week reading regulations, laws, and interpretation letters yourself, on top of an executive MBA in progress, a master's in emergency safety and risk management, and an active PNC license. What put that habit in place, and what's the most useful thing you've ever pulled out of going to the source on a regulation?
I'll be honest, the IRS deal kind of really led me down that little path. And I was kinda on that path beforehand. I have read the entirety. I like I like to read OSHA findings. I swear I'm really fun at parties. But I like to read, like, the well explosion down in the Gulf in, 2010. I read that entire it was like, oh, I don't remember how many hours it was, but I read it like it was a novel. And I mean, the movie with Mark Wahlberg is great, right? But they have a lot of the facts going in because of their storytelling. When I read rules, laws, and regulations, my brain processes that as if it's a novel and it's storytelling.
Hmm.
So, for me, I'm not the greatest person at asking for help. I'm that person of like, why do I wanna ask you for help when I don't know where you got your information? I wanna be Miss Mary Right. I wanna be right because I'm that person that I got a whole bag full of receipts, and when you tell me I'm wrong, it's gonna be a bad day for you. Like, that's where I'm at, and I think a lot of that stems from college. I think a lot of that because I mean, I went to a liberal arts college and it was 99,9,000% critical thinking of where did you get your information? How do you know it's credible? How do you know that that is truth? Well, everything can be skewed no matter where you get your info. But if you think through it, of, "Hey, I did my due diligence. I didn't just read it as a timeline or something on Facebook." If I see, I'm like, "Oh, I wonder if there's any, validity to that." So, I will go back and I will try to find a credible source, a white paper, some sort of journal, some sort of something somewhere. Because Wikipedia is just put in there by people, like, that is not no. And AI, you gotta be very careful with AI because it'll lie to you. Right? I think attorneys are figuring out, don't use ChatGPT for your research. But if you don't read it yourself, how do you know what it says? How do you know you're doing things the right way? And how can you, if someone questions you, if you get an IRS audit and say, hey, I've been doing this the way your interpretation letter said, then they can look back and be like, oh, maybe we were wrong. Or maybe, blah, blah, blah. Like, hey, we understand you did. Like, I'm trying to do as much as I can to make sure it's correct. Every three-letter acronym within the government always puts out an interpretation letter of the law that says, this is how we interpret what this says. Then the fun part is your company, whether it's your legal, suite or the attorney you hire for you to read the contract or the reg, you have to decide what the interpretation letter means. You have to interpret the interpretation. So that's where I like to play in the gray area and know, hey, some people are doing it this way, some people are doing it this way. This is how I think it should be done. That's how so many companies get away with a lot of things anyway, because there's not a cut and dry black and white to any law. To any law or regulation, you take it in front of a judge is going to have a different opinion. You put 4 attorneys in a room, you ask them the same question, 5 attorneys are going to come out and say that they're all going to have 5 different opinions, even though there's only 4 attorneys. Like, it's weird. That's how you have to figure out what it means for you. And then you bring in industry best practice with that. And usually you'll be right.
Last section here, Veronica, is burn the boats. Burn the boats came up during our planning call. What does committing fully to plan A look like in practice when cash is tight and your crew needs to make payroll on Friday?
That means go all in, man. Go all in. I'm an elder millennial. My generation comes from have a plan B to fall back on. Yeah, well, here's what happens with that. When you have a plan B to fall back on, you're always going to be stuck in plan B. So if you are not fully committed to plan A, which is what you wanted to do, I mean, if you really want to do it, you're going to find a way. If you're not fully committed to plan A and you jump out of that boat, you're getting ready to storm the island, light them boats on fire. There's no way back. You can't go backwards. You can, but that's not a good way. Like, if you burn the boats, you're fully committed. Be like, I have to figure this out. I have to win this. I will figure out a way. If you live your life that way, dude, no one can stop you. Nobody but yourself. You are only in competition every single day with yourself. You can compare yourself to others. It will never work out for you that way. But if you are just being, 0.5%, 1% better than you were the day before, burn the boats. Forget about plan B. The only time plan A, B, and C work is if hey, making, this could put us between a rock and a hard place, and here's the decisions I want to be able to make. That's the only time you use A, B, or C. Burn the boats, man. Fully commit. Yeah.
Dynamite is a husband and wife shop, and you've talked about your thoughts on skin in the game. The idea that the business has to outlive its owners. How do you and your husband split the seats? And what's the early version of building a real working succession plan for the business?
Oh, that's a good one. I left Pipeline because I was tired of the corporate BS. I apparently do like working on projects. I want to say I got drugged, that my husband drugged me back into this, but he really didn't. We didn't set off for it to be this. We started working on heavy equipment, on the mechanical side, and it just kind of morphed into, hey, I know how to do this, and somebody's asking us to do this, and all the things. My husband is really the brains and the skill behind all of this from the start. I'm just the one that navigates the paperwork behind the scenes. I'm the one that's like, hey, I know we need to involve this process. We need to create our own process off of this because this is industry standard. I know how to job cost. We need to put this into place, blah, 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 blah. It's really exciting for me when he walks into a meeting and there's almost a sigh of relief from the company that he's meeting with because they know whatever their issue, they know he can figure it out. And that is like, I mean, and I'm not tooting our own horn, but since it's not my horn, I'll toot it. It's crazy when, and he's not, I mean, he's a very bearded, manly guy who he doesn't know how to take good old boys, slaps on the back. Like, I'm the same way. I don't know how to take compliments at all. But it makes me really smile when he's like, I got a phone call today. And it started out like this. Hey, I hear you guys are the A team. Can you come to
Oh,
Tennessee? And I'm like, sure, like, I'm like, he's like, I never know what to say to that. And I'm like, just keep not hearing it. Just keep not hearing it and keep doing what you're doing. And so it's really, really makes me happy that he is shining and he is like, this is I call it our business. This is his business. Like, I just help facilitate some things. I've done all of this. He didn't get to see a lot of that and see kind of my end of it, but I've done all of this stuff. I've lived and worked this life, even like when I was a kid with my dad, going to some of the wells with him and working with some of that stuff too. And, I mean, we build it together, but it's really his. And he is just shining in his own. He is the man.
mm.
It's exciting. It's exciting to watch. He like totally 100% deserves it. And the guys around him, it's like, I feel like we need to be getting, instead of like new trucks, we need to be getting like old, like black A-team vans and just like rolling in, with like, I just like want to give out some gold chains to the
Yeah.
guys at Christmas or something, you know what I mean? Like, just like crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
What about the succession plan?
The succession, we've put a handful of people that have kind of been our mentors together. We're formulating kind of a way for, I don't know if the employee owned is the way we want to go yet, but we want this to outlive us. And so, because other people depend on it, and when you don't have any kids to leave stuff to, and I guess there's a lot of other business people, and I would love to hear from them on how they're not leaving it to their kids or they're not building it for their kids. Cause like, I see a lot of kids get, handed over stuff and then it just goes, beep. Like, we want to build something. Obviously, we're building something that's worth a legacy and that's sustainable. We want to keep honoring that and building it bigger, that in the end time, if we want to retire, if we want to, I don't think I don't think I'd be comfortable just selling it to the highest bidder. If we ever did that, that's just like a maybe, like back on I don't even know if I need to think about this, but just like putting good people around us, be like, hey, how do we do this? What's the plan? And that might be a somewhat of a employee owned stuff eventually with a board, around that, we have the right people in the right places and it really can sustain itself. We're looking at all of those avenues right now. There's like nothing out there. There's not a plan out there that I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. That works. Or yeah, I want to do that. I want to pick things from all of them and kind of put them together. Nobody does that. So like I said, it's like a super far off forethought.
Yeah, you still have a lot of time to figure this out.
Yeah.
The last one here, Veronica, is for the construction owner who's where you were 3 years ago, knee deep in QuickBooks at 11 p.m. and second guessing everything. What's the one thing you want them to do this week? And feel free to make the pitch for Dynamite R&D.
The one thing I want you to do is if you have the money to hire an accountant, go hire an accountant. Don't just hire Susan from down the street because she does some books for people. Go and sit down with at least 5 accounting firms that do construction, not that do taxes, that help, Brian with his t-shirt business, that do construction, that do union construction. Sit down with them and say, hey, what does it cost for you to help me with my books? Help me get started. Teach me how to maintain them. Maybe you can maintain them. Maybe, I can just put everything in, then you can reconcile them. That is going to be, I wish I would have done that earlier, but I want things done now. I want them done fast. So I know all of the numbers and I can just start grabbing and I know where we're going. We're past that now. We're putting in processes and all the things. The biggest thing is CPA firm. Get them on your payroll, get them on your retention, whatever you got to do to work with them. And if you, after 3 months, let's say you sign a year contract, make sure there's something in there that's like, hey, in 3 months, if I decide they're not working.
Yeah, actually, construction accounting is hard. That's why, like a generic accountant from, let's say, someone who's doing clothing accounting, they won't be very good for construction accounting. I feel really thankful for someone like you and your company who's doing this kind of really complicated and difficult jobs. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. I had a great time talking to you. Thanks for listening to Finance at the Job Site. If you found today's conversation valuable, share it with a teammate and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. You can listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or watch on YouTube. Just search Finance at the Job Site. Until next time, here is to building smarter, faster, and more profitable projects.